They thought they had bought just another old house, a place to start their life together. But on the very first night, their loyal dog refused to rest. He scratched at the same spot on the bedroom floor, as if guarding a secret buried deep within the wood. At first, they laughed it off, but when the scratching grew more persistent, curiosity turned into unease. One day, they lifted the boards and uncovered a box that had been waiting in silence for 30 years. What they found inside wasn't just forgotten letters. It was a warning from the past. Michael, a man in his early 30s with sandy hair and a calm but determined look, carried the last moving box into their new home. Emily, his wife with auburn hair tied back neatly, smiled with relief as she placed another box beside him. The house was old, with creaking steps and walls that whispered of years gone by. For them, it was more than a building. It was the promise of stability after years of renting small apartments. Their golden retriever, Buddy, wagged his tail and ran from room to room, his golden fur glowing in the afternoon sun. That first night, as Michael quickly fell into a deep sleep, Emily lay awake, listening to the house groan in the silence. Buddy, instead of curling up beside the bed, paced the floor with unusual energy. His nails clicked on the wooden boards until suddenly he stopped and began scratching at a single spot. Emily whispered his name, but he ignored her. Something about the way his brown eyes fixed on the floor unsettled her. She told herself it was nothing, but deep down, a strange shiver ran down her spine. Buddy was trying to tell them something. The next morning, Michael laughed when Emily described Buddy's behavior. "Probably mice under there," he said, brushing it off with a grin. But Buddy repeated the same actions that evening, sniffing the floor, whining softly, then scratching again. Emily knelt down, tapping the wood, noticing how hollow it sounded. Michael's smile faded as he crouched beside her, listening carefully. The floorboard felt loose under his hand, and Buddy's excitement only grew. It was clear their dog wasn't chasing pests. Something waited beneath them, and it seemed determined to be found. Their curiosity was turning into quiet unease. Over the following days, Buddy grew more restless, refusing to leave the bedroom unless called. Michael finally fetched a small flashlight, kneeling to inspect the cracks between the planks. Emily, crouching nearby, held her breath as dust rose from the floor. Buddy pawed urgently at the same spot, his nails scraping louder, his eyes never leaving the wood. "It feels like there's something hollow," Michael muttered. Emily's heart pounded in her chest. It wasn't imagination anymore. The dog was leading them to something real. The sunlight streaming through the window only made the mystery glow brighter, impossible to ignore. One Saturday afternoon, Michael finally decided to act. With a crowbar in hand, he pried at the stubborn wooden plank. Emily stood close, one hand over her mouth, eyes wide with fear and curiosity. Buddy barked sharply, his tail wagging, urging them on. The wood creaked, split, and gave way with a sharp crack. A rush of stale air rose from below, carrying a scent of rust and dust. Beneath the floor, the faint edge of something metallic glimmered in the sunlight. Their hearts skipped a beat. Whatever had been hidden there had finally revealed itself after decades. Michael leaned closer, brushing away layers of dust to reveal the shape beneath the floor. It wasn't just metal scraps. It was a box, old and rusted, wedged tightly between the beams. Emily's hands trembled as she crouched beside him, whispering, "Who would hide something here?" Buddy pressed his nose against the opening, whining softly, his tail stiff with tension. Michael pulled harder, wood splintering around the edges. Slowly, the box shifted, scraping against the frame. The sunlight caught on its surface, making the corroded iron glow faintly. Whatever secrets it carried had been locked away for decades. It took both of them to lift the box free. Michael grunted under the weight, his muscles straining as he dragged it onto the bedroom floor. Emily pressed a hand to her chest, staring at the object that had slept beneath them all along. Buddy circled the box, sniffing with determination, his golden fur catching the light. Dust coated the surface like a burial shroud. The lock was thick with rust, refusing to budge under Michael's fingers. Emily whispered, Should we even open it? But Michael, wiping sweat from his brow, only shook his head. We have to know. They carried the box to the bed, laying it carefully on the faded quilt. The sound of metal against wood echoed in the quiet room. Emily leaned close, brushing dust away with cautious fingers. Symbols scratched faintly into the surface seemed to tell a forgotten story. Michael stared at them, brow furrowed, while Buddy rested his head against the mattress, eyes locked on the box. The house felt suddenly colder, as though holding its breath. Sunlight filtered in through thin curtains, illuminating every scratch, every dent, every sign of time. Something from another life was waiting inside. The box sat between them like a silent witness. Emily's hands hovered over the lock, but she pulled back each time, as though afraid of what might emerge. "What if it's dangerous?" she asked softly. Michael shook his head, his sandy hair falling across his eyes. "It's part of this house's story, and now it's part of ours." Buddy pawed at the bed, whining, his deep brown eyes urging them forward. Michael fetched a small tool, prying at the brittle lock. Dust rose with each movement, sunlight glinting off the metal. The past was about to speak. The crowbar screeched against rusted iron, sparks of friction filling the air. Michael gritted his teeth, forcing the lock until it cracked with a sharp snap. Emily gasped, clutching his arm, her heart racing. Buddy barked once, then went silent, ears raised in alert. Together, they lifted the lid slowly, as if unsealing a tomb. Inside lay a stack of envelopes, bound by string, their edges yellowed with age. A faint smell of ink and paper filled the room. Michael exchanged a glance with Emily. They both knew. This was not trash. This was someone's hidden truth. Emily's hands shook as she untied the fragile string around the letters. The first envelope was brittle, its paper browned with age. She slid the contents out carefully, unfolding a page filled with faded handwriting. Michael leaned closer, his breath shallow. The words were personal, almost intimate, speaking of love, loss, and a warning about trust. Emily's lips quivered as she read softly, her voice trembling in the quiet room. Buddy sat silently at her feet, his head tilted as if listening. Sunlight bathed the letter in gold, every word seeming to glow with a strange importance. The second letter carried names neither of them recognized, people who once lived within these very walls. Emily traced the ink with her finger, whispering each name as though trying to breathe life back into forgotten souls. Michael frowned, his eyes narrowing at a particular line that hinted at betrayal and fear. "This doesn't sound like a love story," he muttered. Buddy stirred uneasily, pacing in circles, his nails clicking against the floorboards. The house creaked around them as though responding to the discovery. The sunlight dimmed briefly behind clouds, casting a heavier shadow across the room. Nestled between the letters was a small, crumpled photograph. Michael lifted it carefully, brushing off the dust. The image was black and white, showing a young couple smiling in front of the very same house. Their faces were full of hope, yet there was a sadness in their eyes. Emily gasped, covering her mouth. "It's them," she whispered, though she had no idea who they were. Buddy placed his head gently on Emily's lap, his brown eyes fixed on the picture. Sunlight streamed through the window, highlighting the faded edges, as if reminding them that time leaves scars. Letter after letter revealed fragments of a hidden life. The writer spoke of secrets they couldn't share aloud, of a burden too heavy to carry. Emily's eyes filled with tears as she read passages about fear of being followed, about the need to protect someone dear. Michael clenched his jaw, his hand tightening around hers. The weight of the words pressed into their hearts like stone. Buddy lay still, ears raised, his breathing calm but alert. The bedroom felt smaller, heavier, as if the walls themselves leaned in closer, listening to the stories uncovered from beneath the floor. At the bottom of the box rested a small, rusted locket. Michael picked it up carefully, his fingers brushing away decades of dust. Inside was a tiny photograph of a child, her innocent eyes staring out as if pleading through time. Emily's breath caught in her throat, her voice breaking as she whispered, Who was she? Michael shook his head, unable to answer. Buddy pressed against Emily's side, his warm fur grounding her trembling body. Sunlight struck the locket, sending a soft glimmer across the walls. The mystery was no longer just about the box. It was about a life. Michael unfolded another letter, his hands trembling slightly. The ink had faded, but the words were sharp enough to pierce the silence. If you are reading this, it means the danger still lingers. Emily's eyes widened, her voice catching as she whispered the lines aloud. This was not just a personal diary. It was a message, a warning meant to survive decades. Buddy whimpered softly, resting his head on Emily's knee as though sensing her fear. Sunlight poured across the fragile paper, making the faded words glow. Michael's heart sank. Whatever had haunted this family was far from ordinary. That night, neither Michael nor Emily could sleep. The box sat open at the foot of their bed, its contents spread across the quilt. Emily stared at the ceiling, her mind racing with unanswered questions. Michael sat upright, rereading the warning until the words blurred in his tired eyes. Buddy lay at the bedroom door, his body tense, ears twitching at every creak. The house felt alive, breathing around them, holding back secrets it wasn't ready to release. Outside, the moonlight softened the old walls, but inside, the air was heavy with the weight of something unresolved. The next morning, Emily clutched another letter, her fingers trembling as she read aloud passages describing strange noises in the house and footsteps in the night. They felt watched, she whispered, her voice breaking. Michael's expression hardened. He wanted to believe it was paranoia, but the fear woven into the words was undeniable. Buddy barked suddenly, startling them both, then ran to the window, staring out as if expecting someone there. Sunlight streamed in, but even in the brightness, the room felt shadowed by old fears. Michael took Emily's hand. The past was reaching into their present. Among the bundle was a final note, smaller and written in a shaky hand. Emily unfolded it gently, tears filling her eyes as she read about the child in the photograph. The writer spoke of protecting her from someone who wished her harm, of hiding evidence until the time was right. Michael clenched his jaw, staring at the locket again. Buddy whined softly, pushing his nose into Emily's arm, as if comforting her. The sunlight through the window fell directly on the photograph, the child's innocent face glowing faintly. It was no longer just history, it was tragedy. The more they pieced together, the clearer it became. This house had been both a home and a prison for the family who lived here. Betrayal, secrecy, and fear had soaked into its walls. Michael sat heavily on the edge of the bed, running his hands through his sandy hair. Emily sat beside him, clutching the letters, her shoulders trembling. Buddy leaned against her leg, steady and loyal, his golden fur warm beneath her fingers. The sun poured through the window, but even in daylight, the air felt cold. The box had given them answers, but also deeper questions. At the very bottom of the box lay a small leather-bound diary. Emily lifted it carefully, the cover cracked and brittle with age. She opened it to the first page, where delicate handwriting filled the lines with daily fears, hopes, and desperate prayers. Michael leaned close, his eyes scanning over her shoulder, the weight of each word pressing into him. The writer described sleepless nights, hiding the child from danger, and the endless waiting for help that never came. Buddy rested his head on Emily's knee, his brown eyes full of quiet comfort. Sunlight fell gently on the fragile pages. The entries grew darker as Emily turned the pages. Descriptions of shadows outside the window, voices in the hallway, and the feeling of always being watched filled the diary. They lived in fear, Emily whispered, her hand trembling as she traced the ink. Michael clenched his fists, his jaw set tightly. Buddy growled softly at the door, his instincts still sharp even in daylight. The house groaned as if remembering those nights. Sunlight streamed in, but the diary's words made the room colder. The family's terror was no longer a distant story. It was a haunting echo in the present. They spread the letters, photographs, and trinkets across the bedroom floor, piecing together a story of love, betrayal, and survival. Emily's eyes brimmed with tears as she held the locket, staring at the child's face again. Michael ran his hand through his sandy hair, his expression heavy with thought. Buddy sat close, his golden fur glowing in the afternoon sun, watching over them with quiet loyalty. The items looked ordinary, yet together they formed a warning meant to be heard decades later. The past was no longer buried, it demanded to be acknowledged, and it had chosen them to listen. Among the last papers was a sealed envelope, untouched by time. Michael hesitated, then broke the seal with careful hands. Inside was a final message, written with urgency. If this reaches you, protect yourselves. The truth was never meant to be hidden forever. Emily's lips parted, her breath catching as she read aloud. The room seemed to fall silent, even Buddy lowering his head, ears twitching as if sensing the weight of the moment. Sunlight fell directly on the letter, the faded ink glowing in the golden light. It was no longer just history. It was a warning. Michael and Emily sat side by side on the edge of their bed, the final letter spread between them. Their hands touched, fingers intertwined, as silent tears ran down Emily's cheeks. Michael's face was solemn, his sandy hair catching the glow of the sun. Buddy rested his head gently on Emily's lap, his golden fur warm, his deep brown eyes watching them with loyalty. The house was quiet, the box empty, its secrets finally spoken. Sunlight poured into the room, illuminating their faces. The past had reached across 30 years to find them, and now it would never be forgotten.